Well, good morning, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. Wanted to come to you this Tuesday, Tag Tuesday, with the Life Stories tag. Now, this is a tag that was created by Mark over at Book Time with Elvis. He has become pretty famous here in our little corner of the world. He's very prolific in his creation of tags. And like I said, he tagged me in the Life Stories tag a couple of weeks ago. And I'd had the answers done and just hadn't had a chance to record. So I wanted to get this recorded for you. Excuse me. I'll leave Mark's information down in the description below so that you can go check out his video and go like his video, go subscribe to his channel. He's got a good thing going on over at his channel and pretty good stuff over there. So let's go ahead and get started. So question number 1 on the Life Stories tag: do you have a preference for biography or autobiography? For me, I prefer biography. I think that biography gives a little bit more well-rounded look at a person's life versus autobiography. Now, autobiography has its place, and I've read some of those and that I have enjoyed, but I found that biography, like I said, it's more well-rounded. It isn't quite as slanted or biased. I tend to read biographies that are about people that are, 20, 25, 30 years past their either they've passed away or they're out of the limelight, so that it's more rounded. I try not to read recent biographies, but they're about people that have been passed away or past their prime. So number 2, do you gravitate towards a specific area like sports, celebrity, history, etc.? And for me, it's almost always history. I love to read history. It is just what I really like, and so most of my stuff is historical figures in one way or another. And usually it's all they are based around what I teach in my classes at school. I read for enjoyment, but I also read so that I can become more well-rounded myself and know a little bit more and be able to tell some more stories in class to help the kids understand and grasp information and enjoy history. Now, that's not to, I don't want to throw other biographies out the window, because I really like my sports biographies also, especially baseball. If you follow the channel, I love baseball. I coach baseball. I've loved baseball since I was a little kid. And so throughout the year, I'll read a couple, 3 baseball biographies typically. A lot of times during the summer when we're in baseball. And I really like those. Now, those don't always have to be, for me, don't have to be about people who've been dead for 20, 25, 30 years or more. Those, I read recent ones as well. I read those out of pure enjoyment. And a lot of times, like last summer, I read a handful of them that were about people from the 1980s, 1990s, that time period that I grew up in, and I remember watching the guys on TV. So those are a little bit more recent, and I just wanted to mention baseball biographies because I really like those. It's kind of like a candy to me. They're not necessarily always good for me. They aren't going to necessarily help my life as a teacher, but I really enjoy them. So let's move on. So question number 3. Have you ever read the life story of someone and in doing so changed your opinion of them for better or for worse? Example. So for me, I read, when was it? Was it December or November, December? I can't remember. My buddy read the book Einstein. And I've always found Einstein, he's a fascinating character. Pop culture loves him. And so I was real excited to read his biography by Walter Isaacson. And when I read that, I was quite surprised at what I found. He was not necessarily, in his professional career, he was amazing. But in his personal life, I was quite disappointed, because I guess in my head I had this picture of him as being this warm fuzzy guy that everybody loves, and what I quickly found out is in his personal life he wasn't necessarily as lovable a character. And he cheated on his wife, and had girlfriends on the side, and just a lot of issues that really bothered me personally. Now, I'm not going to say it necessarily changes my opinion of him like professionally, but definitely personally that that bothered me, and so changed my opinion of him a little bit in that respect, of course, and it made my opinion worse of him on his personal life. Now, again, on his professional life, I'm still amazed at what he was accomplishing in science and mathematics and stuff. The stuff that they went over in the book, he went over in the book, it's way over my head. I'm impressed. So yes, I've read a biography on somebody that has changed my opinion of them. Question number 4. Must you always know who the person is before picking up their life story? I usually do at least know the name, from history. I like to pick up books about people that I've never read about before, but I typically know their names, if that makes any sense. I always want to increase my knowledge in my teaching area, and so a lot of them are historical figures within the areas that I teach. But that does not mean that I don't pick up stuff about people I've never heard of in time periods I don't teach. I read both. Typically, so like an example, I read a lot on Lincoln and Washington. Absolutely love those eras of history, and their lives are continually they continue to fascinate me, and so I continue to read about them, and I read about other presidents of the United States. I like that part of history. But I've also read, like last year, I read one on one of the queens of England. I read one on about a lady who was converted in England to Mormonism and came to Salt Lake City and lived in the Mormon community. I read a biography on her. I read The Glass House about a journalist. And so I've read stuff in other areas, but typically I read about people that I'm familiar with. Maybe I haven't read their biography yet, but I at least know their name. Number 5. Have you ever met someone whose autobiography you've read? Okay, so I was sitting there thinking about this, and I don't think so. I do not believe that I've read a biography on somebody that I've known. But I did read, there was a book that came out about the Clemente A's baseball team and the creation of the Clemente A's, and it was a little bit of a biography, not only on the A's, but also of the main coach. And I go to church with his son, and I coach against his son over in Clarinda. And so I have, in that respect, kind of read a book about somebody I've known. I never actually met his dad, but I know him. So there you go. That's about as close as I've gotten. Number 6. What do you think about books that are described as semi-autobiographical? They're okay, but they're not the gospel truth, and I'll just leave it at that. They're okay. Number 7. Give an example of a life story that really surprised you. Okay, so for me, a life story that really surprised me was Benjamin Franklin. I've been teaching 15 years now of American history to my kids, and for the whole time when I teach colonial history, Benjamin Franklin continues to amaze me. His not only his Renaissance life, his Renaissance man, have my hands in everything life, but also his rags to riches story. I think that is like basically the ultimate American dream, and he's the epitome of what it is to be American, to start out poor and end up rich and just live a very full life, and I think that's pretty amazing. I've also found it pretty fascinating to read about Mary, Queen of Scots, her life as Queen of Scotland, and what was at the time a potential Queen of England. Of course, there was a lot of controversy about that, and Elizabeth I made sure that that didn't happen. And just the life of those female characters in that time period, you know, Mary Queen of Scots, Elizabeth I, and just all of them, and just how much they had to overcome to be the successes that they were. I found that to be pretty amazing. And I will continue to read about that era just because of that fact. Number 8, what biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, etc. are currently on your TBR? Okay, so for me, on my current TBR in the next month or two, I started reading a book on Thaddeus Stevens. I did take it back to the library, but as soon as I finish up a couple books, I'm going to go back and get it. It's going to be a quick read. It's a new one that's out. Bruce Levins, I think was the author's name. Quick read, very good. I'm going to do that one. Douglas Macarthur, which is on my shelf somewhere around, oh, right up here on my shelf up here. I started reading that. I am going to finish that after. I'm working on a Civil War book right now, but I'm going to go to that one next and knock that one out and get it off the list. Very fascinating life. I'm also going to be reading Sidney Blumenthal's Abraham Lincoln Volume 2. And I got it up on the shelf over there. I don't know if you can quite see that one, but I read Volume 1 last summer, and I'm going to read, or last fall, I'm going to read Volume 2 here in the coming months, and then Grant by Ron Chernow. I want to get that one knocked out this year. And so those are some biographies that are on my TBR. 3 of the 4 are fairly thick books. The Thaddeus Stevens will be quick, but the other ones are going to take a little bit of time. But again, about fascinating characters of history. So question number 9, whose life story did you find particularly hard going? Either emotionally difficult to read or very boring. I'm going to go with very boring, at least to me. Dean Acheson's, I believe the book was called Present at the Creation. That was rough. I found that one so dry and so boring. Not that he didn't do interesting things in his life. He just didn't tell a very good story. It was so boring, at least to me anyway. I do plan on going back to the book. I don't know that I actually even finished the book because it was so boring, but I don't like to DNF books if I can keep from it, and I plan on trying to go back at that sometime in the future. I'm going to have a different mindset, but that would be my book that was particularly hard going. So question number 10. Is there anyone you know personally who you feel should have their life story written down? I think that at Northwest Missouri State University, former football coach Mel Churchma should have his life story written down. If it hasn't, I looked, I don't believe it's been written down, but he is one of the most prolific Division II football coaches of all time. He won several national championships. He brought the Northwest Missouri State Bearcats football program out of the deep, dark recesses. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about his first year. I don't know if he won a game his first year he got the program, and they didn't win very many before he got there. But within his second year, he was already starting to turn the program around, and he turned it into a national powerhouse. That is, every year in the running for the national title, and that all started with Mel Churchma. He's a Christian man. We got the privilege of having him come speak at our school as one of our opening day speakers. My wife had a class with him when we were there at Northwest, and he is just an amazing person. Very, very nice guy. So I guess if one comes out on his life, I could fill that in for, let's see, what was it? The question on, have you ever met somebody on a biography? So if it ever comes out, I can redo this video and put that one in there. So I would also say there's another character that I would like to see a book written about. He was a personal friend of mine. I taught with him, Rod Vanderheiden. He was a middle school science teacher. He was also a guidance counselor for a while, and he coached athletics, and just a teacher whose heart was bigger than the room. He cared about his kids. He went above and beyond, way out of his way. He was a single man, and so he'd get to school at like 5:30 in the morning, wouldn't leave till 9 o'clock. tremendously dedicated to the school, the students at the school, had a heart for being a teacher and just being important in these kids' lives. And he overcame some personal difficulties. He had a disability. He was legally blind. He, very well known for going around the school with his cane, tick, 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 as he's going down the halls. Everybody loved him. We'd have parent-teacher conferences, and the guy would have lines, that they'd say conferences are over, and he'd have 4 or 5 parents that would still stay and wait to talk to him. Not even necessarily because their kids, that, they were having issues or anything, but they just wanted to talk to him. He was just an amazing man. Coached basketball and softball and football, and he just was a wealth of knowledge in athletics, in like I said, he was a science teacher, in just life in general. The man was a good man. I'd love to see a biography written on him. So question number 11. Have you read any diaries or collections of letters? And if so, which ones did you find interesting? Now, I don't usually do that. The closest that I've come is my uncle wrote a book on what was the name of is it the 145th, 154th Pennsylvania Volunteers? I can't remember the number. I'm sorry. But he did, he wrote a book, and it's a 2-volume. Both volumes are monster size. And it is mainly built upon the letters of those soldiers that were in that group. And pretty amazing stuff. So I have read that collection, but it was more of a biography of the group. But it was based on letters, so I would say that one. And they entered the Civil War right at they came in the last day of Antietam, and then they served all the way through Appomattox. And so it's an amazing story of all of these soldiers and their lives and just what it was like to be in war. I also have a diary, a World War I diary of a family member of mine, of a grandpa of mine, who served for the United States in World War I, served in most of the major engagements, and I use that in my classroom, and we read through that diary right after we talk about the different battles and what the soldiers were going through, and then we put that in there, and it gives a really good life perspective of life of the soldiers on the home front. So those are the ones that I have found interesting. So question number 12. What are a few life story books that you would recommend us to read? So some of my favorites, of course, I mentioned Lincoln. I love Lincoln. I would read Don Fehrenbacher's book, Lincoln in the 1850s. It's a wonderful look at his rise to power in the 1850s and the abolitionist era, looking at all of the issues of the 1850s, my favorite era to study, and just looking at his rise in politics and what he did in his run up to the presidency. I would also read Lincoln's Melancholy, How Depression Challenged and Fueled His Greatness, by Joshua Schenck. Wonderful psychological biography on Lincoln, and it shows how his depression really affected his life, but how he used it for the good and used it to, get him focus in his life. Very good account. I like to read about George Washington, as I've shared. I love Joseph Ellis's book, His Excellency George Washington. It's a smaller book, but it's got a lot of impact. I think it was a wonderful biography. On Ben Franklin, who I mentioned earlier, I would recommend the First American, The Life and Times of Benjamin Franklin by H.W. Brands. It's a big, thick book, but man, is it worth reading. It caught me right from the prologue. And then last, since I mentioned baseball, one of my favorite baseball biographies is Clemente, The Passion and Grace of Baseball's Last Hero by David Marinus. Excellent account of Pittsburgh Pirates outfielder and just his life in baseball, and then of course his tragic ending, which, what could he have done if he had still lived? There's always that question. But anyway, he was a great baseball player, very enjoyable to read about. But anyway, that brings us to the end. BookTube. Most or a lot of you have done the life stories tag. If you haven't, I recommend doing it. I'm not going to tag individual people because a lot of the people on my list that I would tag for this have already been tagged and they've already done the video. If you haven't, feel free to do that. Make sure you go down in the description. Go check out Mark's channel. Give him some subscriptions. Check out that video. Like the video. And like I said, if you haven't done the tag, go ahead and do it. So, BookTube, this has been the Life Stories tag here on Tag Tuesday. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. And until next time, happy reading.